Good morning, everyone, and thank you for giving the IIBU leadership an opportunity to present our significant progress over the last 2 years and talk about our exciting prospects for future growth, including Dialog. Today, you will hear from myself, as well as 2 members of the IIBU leadership team, Chris Allexandre, Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales and Corporate Marketing for IIBU, as well as Roger Wendelken, who's our Senior Vice President and General Manager for Microcontroller Division. Let me begin with the agenda. I'm going to review our financial progress since we began the repositioning of IIBU in early 2019. Then, Chris Allexandre will provide a view of our sales strategy and perspective on how we see the near-term and midterm market trends. I will then come back and talk about our product strategy. We will then provide an update on each of the areas we had highlighted at our previous Analyst Day events, beginning with MCUs, which Roger will talk to. I will then come back and talk to the secular trends we see in our end markets and wrap it up with an updated financial model that includes Dialog. Next slide. This slide summarizes our significant growth both on the top line as well as bottom line since early 2019. Given we do not provide guidance for the full year, we have presented the data for the first 9 months in each of the prior years for appropriate context. In addition to the considerable revenue growth, a CAGR of 15%, you can see our gross margin, EBITDA, and OI expansion with 23% CAGR, 31% CAGR, and 55% CAGR, respectively. The faster rate of growth in the bottom line reflects a meaningful operating leverage. I would like to highlight that the top line growth was achieved in spite of headwinds from end-of-life revenue declines from previously associated fab closures. In the absence of end-of-life revenue declines, we would have grown nearly 20%. Let me now change gears. The factors that are driving our growth, in particular, in the gross margin area, have to do with our ability to reduce costs and improve yields. Second, it's associated with improved capacity utilization of our factories. And C, price increases as well. So those 3 factors have driven improvement in our gross margin. The OI and EBITDA improvements are further driven by focusing our R&D investments in areas to maximize our financial returns. It is a performance we as a team are extremely pleased with and expect to drive further over time. While the results shared to this point focus on the standalone IIBU business, I would like to mention that ex-Dialog results without their legacy PMIC business show a CAGR of over 20% over the same 2-year period. We also expect to see strong growth for all segments of the former Dialog business, excluding legacy, in the years ahead, even in the current supply-constrained environment. Next, let me now discuss the growth by market segment in the IoT, industrial, and infrastructure businesses. In the IoT segment, where we see 14% CAGR, a significant portion of our growth is driven by the MCU and analog and power products. In the industrial segment with 4% CAGR, we see growth in our MCU as well as SoC, power, and analog products. The industrial business in particular was impacted by the legacy EOL declines in our SoC business, muting overall growth. We expect that these declines will be behind us by the end of 2022. In the infrastructure area, with a 12% CAGR, growth is largely driven by timing memory interface products, analog, and power. Overall, growth rates for IoT and infrastructure are in excess of market growth rates for comparable periods, while the industrial growth is in line with market growths in the absence of end-of-life products. For the former Dialog business, I would like to mention that over the same period, we see continued growth in custom mixed signal, excluding the legacy PMIC, connectivity and audio, and the analog and mixed signal, as well as the much smaller industrial and IoT business groups. Further, as Shinkai-san mentioned, the headwinds of the legacy PMIC business will be almost entirely behind us by 2022. Let me now turn it over to Chris Allexandre to talk about our sales strategy and outlook.
Thank you, Sailesh, and good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Allexandre, and I'm running global sales and marketing for IBU. Next slide. Let me start to talk about our strategy and what we call our growth playbook. And we call it and define it as deeper and broader. Deeper is selling more and getting more dollar content at our customers, leveraging our entire portfolio from embedded processing, analog, power, and connectivity. Broader means extending our customer base and ensuring that we engage and sell to more customers. That playbook has served us pretty well over the last few years and has become the backbone of our growth strategy. Roger will talk about it, but we are a leader in MCU. We ship nearly 1.5 billion MCU per year to thousands of customers, and we're expanding that footprint, to which you need to add the MPUs that we are selling to hundreds and thousands of customers. That's a very large footprint of components sold at the heart of the customer system that we leverage to add analog, power, and connectivity. Actually, when Renesas merged with IDT and Intersil, we benefited from very little customer overlap and yet very complementary product portfolio. This was the start of our deeper strategy. Overall, we think this deeper strategy is based on cross-selling and adding more around our MCU and MP. We also strongly focus on broadening our customer base. This doesn't only bring revenue, but this brings also margin, as the smaller customers come usually with a higher margin. We've restructured our distribution network in the last 2 years, put new digital tools in place to reach out to more customers online, and we start to see an acceleration of our engagement and our sales to new customers in various applications. On top of going broader and deeper, we have also a specific focus on server, cloud, and mobility. This is a very rich SAM for us in analog and power, and we leverage our leadership position in memory interface, CPU core power, timing, and power computing, adding even now the Dialog product. We are gaining share in a fast-growing market that will continue to serve us very well. Overall, that playbook is the backbone of our strategy and will continue to serve us well as we are merging with Dialog, where we see growing opportunity for us to cross-sell even more product. If we move to the next slide, I want to spend a bit of time on the go-to-market and how we've redeployed our sales force to execute and enable on the broader and deeper. Essentially, we have redeployed our field resource to existing and future customers where we have the biggest growth. That's a growth orientation, sales and field deployment. Our approach is to leverage our scale. We have a very large sales force deployed in all the countries, allowing us to cover more customers, and using distributors to extend our reach. The model is simple. We have our large customers where we do significant revenue at the top that we manage globally. Here, the strategy is about growing the relationship, engage in more application, and leverage again our scale. Then we looked at the entire customer base we have and defined what we called the Asana account, where we have rich SAM and growth potential in MCU, MPU, analog, power, and connectivity. We believe those customers will drive the biggest growth in the year to come. The goal here is very simple. It's to engage across the entire product line and sell everything we have to more application inside of the customer, so we can gain share by having more content in each of the application. Then we work with our distributors to define the markets, the application, and the customers where we have a good fit to go broader. We've redeployed our resource and their resource to ensure we gain traction at those customers under the strategy of go broader and new customer acquisition I talked about. And here the approach is to solution sell with winning combos that I will detail in a later on. Overall, we focus and make a difference at more than 3,000 customers where we deployed our entire sales force directly and indirectly to drive the growth in the future. If you move to the next slide, I want to spend a bit of time on the winning combination, which is really the essence and the foundation of our go broader and deeper strategy referred to before. The winning combination is solution developed for multiple market and application using the entire Renesas portfolio. We actually initiated this approach from the day one of the merger between Renesas and IDT back in early 2019. Winning combination usually include an MCU or many MCUs or MPUs, analog, power, sensors, and any solutions we have to give the customer an easy path to design their system. To date, we've delivered more than 250 individual winning combos over multiple applications, and this keeps growing. We are also adding more and more product in each of the combination, leveraging our extending portfolio. We've built a very strong momentum in the design funnel. You can see on the right side, the design-in to date has already achieved 1.5 billion lifetime design value already achieved, and the opportunity is already 3x more than that. With the Dialog merger, we had on day one, a few weeks ago, already 30 winning combination combining Renesas and Dialog product ready to sell. As we talk to customers over the last few years about those winning combos, we've realized as well that they want us to do more for them. And our winning combination have evolved into more complex system. We call them full system solution. Today, we release about 1/3 of our winning combination in full system solution. Those are more complex, include hardware and software, and almost like a full system the customer can use in their application. This is a game changer as we provide more value to the customers, and that increases our stickiness and our value and drive more device per system, and as such, more content and more growth. Winning combination is really the foundation, as I said, of our go broader and deeper strategy. We address existing customers with our winning combination to sell more in the system, and we approach any new customers with full solution, which help to grow our engagement and our revenue. If we move to the next slide, let me talk about the midterm and the near and midterm revenue growth. This shows the revenue trend by the broader and the deeper customer access, which I mentioned. As you can see, we've seen a rapid impact and acceleration of our go deeper at revenue at the SN account. And that came from two reasons. Number one, vertical. As I mentioned earlier, we have success in gaining share with analog and power in a fast-growing market, which is cloud and server. And we have started to see important impact this year and continue next year. Industrial, that Sailesh mentioned earlier, where we've been able to expand our MCU footprint with new NPI that Roger will detail. More broadly, this success comes from the strategy of using the scale of our sales force and the breadth of our portfolio. As I mentioned earlier, very early from the merge of IDT, Intersil, and Renesas, we had very little customer overlap, giving us the opportunity to add quick wins from the get-go and adding more content around the existing MCU and MPU footprint that we have. As we continue to add more MCU customers and continue to add more analog and power around those MCUs and MPU, we continue to see an acceleration of our go deeper, both in 21, continuing to 22. The mass market and go broader is also seeing an acceleration. First of all, we have the lowest channel inventory ever in our history, with 7 weeks of inventory, while our model is about 10. Our new distribution network has really driven some great results. We engage with more customers more than ever, and our combination sale is growing very fast. Besides, we've invested during the pandemic on new tools and new ways to engage with customer digitally and online, and that starts to make a difference. Overall, I would say going deeper and going broader are equally important for our growth vector in the future. While 2022 is really driven by the go deeper, leveraging our growing content at the customer, we believe the go broader and the mass market will start to have an impact in the years to come. My last slide is to share with you the near and midterm growth by segment. It's the same view across all customer base looking at segment. In 2021, we've seen growth in all segments, but industrial and IoT have been strong growth. We'll continue to see that in 22 with the acceleration of infrastructure coming from 5G and the server business, which I mentioned. Let me start by infrastructure. We see an acceleration in both wireless infrastructure as well as wireline with cloud, server, and networking. On the wireless side, it's coming from the 5G rollout. First happened in China in 2020, and now we see the rollout in the rest of the world for next year. With our strong position in timing and our growing share in RF, we think this is going to continue to drive growth for us. On the wireline side, server continue to be a strong market driven by cloud and hyperscalers. We are gaining share and growing faster than the market, leveraging our memory interface that benefits from the transition to DDR5, which Sailesh will talk about later on, as well as more content attached to the new CPUs of Intel and AMD and as next generation. On the IoT, we continue to see growth in multiple segments, including computing as well as home appliance, leveraging both the MCU, the analog, and the power, and we believe this will continue. We're also getting more MCU content in connected application that Roger will talk about. In industrial, this is a segment where we see the most accelerated growth. We sell MCU, MPU, and other ASICs to those tier one large industrial customers, application from factory automation to home automation, as well as any other industrial application. We see acceleration coming from multiple places. First of all, with all government stimulus around infrastructure upgrade, we are clearly entering into an industrial super cycle. Coupled with acceleration of the digitalization of the manufacturing, the green initiatives, driving smarter machine and more connected machine, we see opportunity for more semiconductor content in industrial. Last but not least, those companies are also benefiting from data centers and smart cities. Beyond expanding our content into those tier one customers, we've also gaining momentum and leveraging our success in tier two industrial customers, in particularly in China, where we've been able to add a lot of engagement. That's why we believe industrial will gradually continue to be a growth vector for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. I'll begin by presenting the IIBU growth drivers at a macro level before getting into the individual product line details. IIBU enables intelligence from the cloud to the endpoint sustainably. This was a point that Shibata-san mentioned earlier during the presentation. While several companies talk to their ability to address the same market, they're far more broad-based in their product approaches. Renesas addresses the cloud and edge area with an extremely focused effort based solely on core competencies. In data center, for example, we focus only on 3 areas. Number 1, timing. Number 2, power and memory interface. And number 3, memory interface products. Similarly, in the 5G infrastructure area, we do only 3 things and do them well: timing, power, and RF, specifically from the antenna to the data converters. In the IoT area, as can be expected, we go broad with our portfolio of products, starting with our MCUs and MPUs, and we cover multiple other competencies, including power, connectivity, industrial automation, and building automation now with the addition of Dialog, as well as AMS solutions and CIMICs from the addition of the Dialog product family. We have always emphasized sustainability in our portfolio, and I will highlight this during the course of the presentation. However, with the acquisition of Dialog, with their emphasis on low power competencies, when coupled with our newly expanded portfolio of environmental sensors, our ability to address this area will grow significantly. Moving now to think about how one should think about our product competencies, let me share a slide that I've presented previously, but highlight a few areas where the addition of Dialog enhances our portfolio. Let's begin with the left, which is a focus on hardware competencies. The heart and the soul of everything we do is at the center, which is edge computing, whether it be MCUs or MPUs. Around it, we build a protective moat of analog, mixed signal, and power. Our competencies in these areas fall into four major buckets, starting with power on the top right-hand side. And there, the addition of Dialog with its low power PMICs improves our capabilities very significantly, as well as the AC-DC conversion, which is an aspect on the low power side that is incredibly helpful for us. Moving to the next quadrant in an anti-clockwise direction and to sensors and signal conditioning, the external world is basically analog. And so sensors provide us with a measure of tracking that capability and bringing it on board. Together with the newly added audio capabilities from Dialog, this is an area we will strengthen. Moving to the bottom quadrant, needless to say, this is something both Shibata-san and others have spoken about. The BLE and the Wi-Fi solutions from Dialog enhance our connectivity and data movement capabilities significantly, especially on the low power front, which is where they're emphasizing. Moving next to the other piece of it, which is local analytics and actuation, our solutions are focused primarily on addressing motor control, robot arms, or building automation from Dialog. We can address this market very effectively. While differentiating in hardware is necessary, it is not a sufficient condition to win in the marketplace. So moving to the right, we emphasize system differentiation in three major areas: interfaces to connect to the external world, and an embedded AI or tiny machine learning solutions. Next, it is about software and user experience improvements to enable the use of our products. And Roger will talk much more about this during the presentation, but earlier, as was alluded to by Shibata-san, this is one of the things that enables us to be differentiated and start gaining traction in the marketplace. Last, but most importantly, security at the edge of the network is tremendously important. And here, we reliably provide our customers with the highest validated security in both software as well as tamper-resistant hardware to address their specific needs. To share a bit more on what I've shown in these slides, I highlight three winning combinations that Chris spoke to. I'm going to begin by sharing with you the smart rangefinder that is a combination of Dialog plus Renesas product. The second item I will highlight is a smart asset tag. And you can really see how small it is. You can see the size of the thing. It's so tiny over here that you can barely see it. And last but not the least, I'm also going to share with you this biosensor with BLE connectivity. As Shibata-san and Chris mentioned previously, this is just the beginning. And we have much more by way of winning combinations and cross-selling to discuss in the future. Next, let me provide you with an update on what we've shared with you at prior analyst days. We will begin with an update by Roger on the progress in the MCU area. After that, I'll come back and talk about our progress in the additional areas listed below. Roger?
Thank you, Sailesh. Some very exciting things there. Hi, I'm Roger Wendelken, the SVP of our MCU business division, and very glad to be with you virtually for the first time, hopefully again in the future, maybe in person. Many people may not recognize this, but Renesas is the #1 MCU supplier in the world. Renesas has now one of the most broad non-auto portfolios of any supplier. We expect to ship over 1.5 billion non-automotive MCUs this year. Our workhorse RL and RX family continue to be leaders in their focus segments. Synergy is an ARM core-based product family and targeted for customers who want complete certified hardware software solution. The new RA family is very broad, from low-end RA2 devices to our high-end RA6 group of products. This is a huge SAM expansion for us. We introduced the first RA device in October 2019, and in less than 2 years, we now have 13 RA family groups, totaling over 150 products. When we enter a new market with a new broad family of products, we're not just dipping our toes in the water like a smaller company without the scale. We release many devices with hundreds of variations, all supported by the massive MCU infrastructure and support in the company. Our philosophy is we don't do this small, we go big or go home. Next slide, please. So please turn your attention to the upper left side. It's a busy graph of this slide. 2.5 to 3 years ago, we recommitted ourselves to the 16-bit market with some key investments around low pin count devices, cost reductions, new family of products, the first of which was the G23, and there's more to come. The 8-bit market is around 3.5 billion. The 4 to 8-bit market is in excess of 3.5 billion. And over time, we'll be upgrading to new devices. And the Renesas 16-bit family is an excellent option with over 1,000 devices to choose from, many product families. We have set successive design-in value records over the last 3 periods. Chris's team is doing a wonderful job here. Each period is a half year. So 3 successive periods, we have set records. We have clear momentum now, and we see this continued share growth that you see in this slide, expanding our already #1 position. And don't think this is low margin business, by the way. This is good GM and OM. It's outstanding. Excuse me. For the 32-bit MCUs, the momentum is accelerating fast as well. The RA and RX products enable Renesas to target the fast-growing endpoint computing platforms, which is more SAM expansion for MCU. I think if you click one more slide, you'll see that in the upper right. Stay tuned next year for some really exciting new products addressing a market space that is further SAM expansion for us in the high-end performance and low-end 32-bit arena. The connectivity products from Dialog, as Sailesh mentioned, will immediately expand our product offering and solution sell via winning combos. In the future, Renesas will be adding more connectivity products that will expand further this solution sell. So very excited about that. As you can see, there's a lot of exciting things going on, many great aspects to talk about, but perhaps what sums this up the best in the lower left corner is our product velocity is nearly 20x what it was just 3 years ago. That's astounding no matter how you look at it. We haven't lost the need for cost reduction. This has been a point of emphasis on all our MCU families, and it's paying dividends now in gross margin, op margin, and competitiveness in winning designs. So next slide, I touched on this a little bit. A few years ago, we saw an opportunity with some R&D investment to breathe new life into our 16-bit product and strategize to capture the massive 4 and 8-bit upgrade potential, which I mentioned is over $3.5 billion. We introduced several new products to address some high potential areas such as security, touch, low pin count devices. We reduced power to become best in class again within this space. And there was a big emphasis on cost optimization. All these actions falling into place, we've successfully set design-in lifetime value records, as I mentioned, over the last 3 successive measuring periods. The momentum is there. And as noted in the prior slide, we see some significant share gains based on our recent and continued success. When one looks at the market specifically being addressed by the RX family, the market share performance is well above the norm and gains particularly in the segments of motor control, both in industrial and home appliance markets. For example, our breadth of products in motor control span the needs from low to high. Matter of fact, I bet all of us have multiple products in our residences that have RX MCUs, perhaps a washer, a dryer, a refrigerator, an air conditioner, maybe even a coffee maker. We recently celebrated 10 years since the first introduction of RX, and we continue to expand this family with more features and give us a large SAM expansion, such as Cap Touch, EtherCAT, CAN interfaces. There's no dispute in performance leadership of this RX family, and we don't plan on ceding this with our future products. As I mentioned before, we already have over 150 products with the RA family, and it spans from low to high, addressing new market spaces, providing significant SAM expansion for us. Just last week, we announced our RA4 entry product offering optimal value with balanced low power and feature integration. We've announced devices with ARM Trust Zone, built-in hardware security, a robust I/O set, including key features, again, such as Cap Touch. And we're now embarking on rounding out the portfolio with our connectivity solutions, and Dialog, again, will enhance the breadth of adoption of these winning combos. The RA family is setting records internal to Renesas, and we're a big MCU company, fastest to 100 million design in value, fastest to 100 devices, total funnel in excess of 2 billion. There's no doubt this will be the fastest MCU to 100 million revenue in a year. We're already 2+ years ahead of prior projections. This is exhilarating, and it's energizing the entire MCU organization. I think Toshi mentioned this as well on RISC-V. Customers continue to want choices, and we saw the growing ecosystem early on for RISC-V. I'm excited to say Renesas will be an early adopter of RISC-V standalone MCU, and we will be sampling our first RISC-V device before the end of the year. And we already have another one in development targeting some specific applications. We intend to be part of any RISC-V momentum in the market. Let me focus on 32-bit for a minute here. The future is bright for our 32-bit revenue growth and share growth, especially with the momentum in our RA and RX family of products. The RA family is exceeding all expectations, as I mentioned, on design-ins, and even more exciting, greater than 75% of these wins are share gains and new customers. Additionally, the RX family is expanding its reach from this dominant home appliance motor control to address both higher end industrial applications and lower end motor control. Furthermore, we expand the SAM of RX with our RX 100 family as a general purpose MCU to address these touch control applications, many of which are the same customers using the RX for motor control. Some proof points include the RX was the world's first general purpose MCU to obtain CMVP level 3 certification under FIPS security standard. You know, we treat security very, very seriously here. There's so much more SAM we can address up and down the product line. On the low end, we're going to be introducing follow-on RA2 devices, which are even more cost competitive than we have today. And on the high end, we'll take a leap forward. This is super exciting by introducing an RA device with M7 class performance, a market we previously did not address. So again, SAM expansion at very good margins. Our upcoming connectivity solutions will enhance the overall solution cell, and in the future, we'll introduce embedded BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy, single die device, and Dialog connectivity products which are already extremely popular and competitive. We've already released winning combos, as you've seen, with Dialog connectivity products and Renesas MCU. And lastly, in this chart, I haven't even layered in the RISC-V products that I mentioned. This will just add more gravy to this chart. Finally, you can't win without pleasing your customer. We take UX, user experience, very seriously and putting extra emphasis now in this area. The new online internet engineer, coupled with the changing way of doing business from adapting to COVID, really emphasizes the importance of this user experience. In my group, we actually had outside contractors who knew nothing about Renesas, and they charted their journey as a first-time user for our core families, RL, RX, and RA. And this detail provided us valuable insight how and where to improve while providing these clear benefits to the customer. The goal is simple here: best-in-class out-of-box experience, no excuses. In summary, the continued growth opportunities and SAM expansion are providing exceptional tailwinds for our MCU business, which is now very diverse, and we see consistent secular growth here. Thanks for taking the time to listen to what I think is a really exhilarating MCU comeback story.
Thanks a lot, Roger. Clearly, you can sense the excitement we have in our MCU product family. Now, I'll address the three highlighted areas. I'll stay in the theme of industrial and IoT, beginning with our MPU family. We expect our recently launched MPU products based on 64-bit ARM cores that are addressable market from 21 to 25 will increase from 1.2 billion to 2.4 billion, while our market share should expand from being 7% to at least 11% by 2025. We have three classes of products in this market, beginning at the very top with the general purpose RZG and RZA series, where we have the #1 share in the 64-bit Linux market. Next, we have our embedded AI products, which is the RZV series, where a differentiated AI and dynamically reconfigurable processor-based products are exceeding market rate growth significantly, a 3x faster than market growth. Last but not the least, but very important to us, are products in industrial automation, which address both real-time operating system as well as networking and control with RZT and RZN products, and where we currently enjoy the #2 position in the marketplace. I had briefly discussed how sustainability is a concept which is critical throughout our development process. You can see from the slide, moving from the left to the right, that with each generation of product throughout our, whether it be embedded AI or whether it be real-time IA or networking IA solutions, we're improving the power to performance. Stated differently, we focus on improved efficiency with each succeeding generation of products. Let us now turn our attention to the industrial analog and power area, which continues to provide secular growth. In this area, we have a portfolio of broadly differentiated products spanning the entire power domain from 100 milliwatts all the way to 1,000 watts, and a supply voltage all the way from below 5 volts up to almost 1,000 volt devices. Clearly, this portfolio allows us to address the industrial market very widely. You can tell from the growth in the opportunity funnel by nearly 7x from 2019 to 2021, with more than half the growth coming from the new products that are shown in colors other than gray, the strong potential promise of driving both design-in as well as revenue growth. You can see our solutions address markets that Chris had alluded to in the presentation, where we already have deep relationships. This is a part of our industrial power going deeper and can span a wide range of applications from home automation to industrial automation to energy management and home appliances. This is an area where we look forward to keeping you abreast of the progress at upcoming Analyst Day presentations. Having updated you on the IoT and industrial market, let me now turn your attention to the infrastructure area by talking about one of the areas of emphasis in the data center. Remember, I had said three things. One is memory interface, second is timing, and third is power. I will focus today on the memory interface products. These products solve one of the biggest challenges in the data center, which is efficiently handling the flow of information from the processor to the dynamic RAM. Moving from the DDR4 generation at the bottom to the DDR5 generation at the top, and the Renesas products are highlighted in the blue color. What is interesting is we see significant expansion opportunities on the high performance server side and the mainstream server side, which is excellent. But what is even more interesting is now we see an expansion to opportunities on the client side, such as laptop and desktop areas with our PIMX and I3C hubs. The client area was not an area of opportunity with DDR4 generation, and as such, offers even further incremental growth. So how should you think about the memory interface opportunity? The two charts on my left and the one in the middle show the growth we expect in our design and funnel. And the revenue here, the revenue growth is as well as the design in is all normalized to 2018. Clearly, with a 2x improvement in the design in and a 60% plus growth on the revenue, this is yet another area where we drive both top line and, if you move to the right, sustainability. You can see there's a tremendous amount of efficiency improvements moving from DDR4 to DDR5. And again, this is a part of our focus on driving growth as well as sustainability across all our businesses. Next, let me wrap up the infrastructure area with an update on one of the disruptions in the 5G market, which is the increasing traction being seen for ORAN, or Open Radio Access Networks. Open Radio Access Networks hold the potential of disruption to the communication area, similar to what occurred in the data center market by decoupling the hardware and the software. Currently, we have partnerships with over 50 companies and are engaged in a variety of reference designs, as well as directly with OEMs and ODMs. I'd like to remind you that while we're addressing this market disruption, we continue to drive aggressive growth at a traditional base of telecom providers, the Nokias, the Ericssons, the Samsungs, the Fujitsus, et cetera. So we continue to drive growth with the more traditional guys while getting attention into the Open RAN market. Our addressable market in this area, whether it's the radio unit with a $200 million SAM, the cloud with a $250 million SAM, or the core with a $50 million SAM, each offers us good prospects for growth of our three areas that I mentioned: timing, RF, and power products, as well as additionally in the core for memory interface, power, and timing products. Moving to the next slide, having addressed our core market of industrial, IoT, and infrastructure, I'd like to share some exciting new markets you're going to be hearing from us on in the to turbo boost our growth. In the industrial area, we're focused on robotics, 3D printing, and test and measurements. In the IoT area, we're focused on drones. And in the infrastructure area, there is a move from the x86 architecture to the ARM CPU. We're heavily involved with all the major customers that are working on the ARM CPU side. And Chris had spoken to this before. And last but not the least, we're driving digital power very aggressively into the telecom space. We're going to address this at upcoming analyst days. Next, I started with our financials, right? And I'm going to end on the same note, talking about our long-term model, which I'm very excited to share. Shibata-san and Shinkai-san had alluded to this, but let me share it with you. Our new model drives growth both on the top line with market growth rates far exceeding SAM, with gross margins of greater than 60% and an operating margin of 30 to 35%. This, by the way, does include the Dialog numbers in it. I remind you that the long-term outlook reflects our commitment to drive improved profitability over time, despite a higher exposure to the consumer market with Dialog. Our financial model should provide a measure of comfort in our ability over time to create significant shareholder value. To summarize, our IIBU product and technology strategy is showing solid traction. You heard from Roger, you heard from Chris. Our core businesses are growing. We expect to see strong growth with our sales strategy of going broader and deeper. Our investments in the 32-bit ARM-based microcontroller are gaining traction, as are our new products. We see share gain in 64-bit general purpose MPUs and our embedded AI solutions and IA solutions. And our power and analog mixed signal strengths are deployed broadly. We've updated our financial model, reflecting strength both on the top line as well as our operational leverage. Thank you very much for your attention.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much.
続きまして、インダストリアル IoT 事業戦略
Next, we'd like to get your questions for the IIBU. So Sailesh, Chris, Roger, please make sure that you stand by with your video on.
それでは質問のある方。
So if you have any question, please use your hand raise icon.
まずはじめに
First,
日経 BP
we'd like to ask Kojima-san from Nikkei BP.
マイクミュートを解除
So please unmute yourself and ask your question, please. This is Kojima from Nikkei BP. Thank you very much. I actually have two questions. One is about the winning combo. My second question is about your RA family. So first, about the winning combo. Within your explanation, you talked about winning combo and full system solution. I think I was able to hear two keywords. But in my understanding, within winning combo, there's already a lot of things in there. And so I wasn't really able to understand what the difference was versus full system solution. So can you explain what difference there is?
So Chris, you want to take that question?
Yeah, so the difference between the full system solution and the winning combination is the complexity of the system. The full system solution are not just hardware and combining MCU, MPU, analog and power, but they are actually full system hardware and software system. Okay, so for instance, a customer can literally use what we provide as a full system solution and implement that in the systems. We provide just a high level of system offering. It's not just combining product together, but it's making the system to work.
Thank you. Understood. So next, it's about RA family. So RA family, you're going to be selling more. Now, in the past, the Renesas core MCU and ARM core MCU, what is the proportion today? I feel like the ranking is really going to change. And so what is the proportion today? And also, you're also going to be putting more MCU, high-end MCU, but then would that compete with low-end RA? Is there going to be any differentiation that you'd like to focus on?
Roger?
Right. So the first question on RA and what's the breakout? As I mentioned, RA was introduced in October 2019. It's going to be the fastest to ramp to 100 million units. So as I said, we'll ship 1.5 billion units. So it's quickly going to approach 10% of our share very, very fast on a unit shipment basis. We try to develop also products that go after different segments, so we don't overlap ourselves. And we've been very successful in that with almost a very high, as I said, greater than 75%. It's probably closer to 90, being new customers and new share gains for us. And I apologize, there was a question on RA2. We're going to expand the low end of the RA family to compete more in the very general purpose, very high volume market. We have exceptional manufacturing and cost competitiveness that we want to take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you. So what about RISC-V MCU? That means it's going to go into even further low-end market. Is that it?
No, not necessarily. We developed RISC-V. The first one we developed is a motor control device, a very cost-effective 32-bit motor control with some built-in algorithms. And then our next one is an ASSP. It's a little early to mention, but it's targeting a very specific segment for us. So we want to expand our SAM here as well.
Thank you. Understood. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Next, this is from Sugiura-san from Daiwa Securities. Please begin your question after unmuting yourself. Thank you very much for the presentations. My name is Sugiura from Daiwa Securities. I have one question. Regarding MCU, what are the factors that can differentiate yourself from the competition? You talked about the RN family and other families that you have a broader product portfolio compared to before. I think each product has their own competitors. So how can you differentiate yourself, both from the hardware perspective and also from the software perspective? When I talk about software, you talked about software itself and also security. So please share with us how to differentiate your product based on software and hardware. Maybe a detailed explanation for all the products may not be needed. I think a typical case that we can understand at our level would be appreciated.
Roger.
You want me to go ahead, Sailesh?
Yeah, please do. Please.
Sure. So that's a very good question. Each of our product families is unique and has its own attributes for competitiveness. The RL78, the 16-bit family, is very broad. It has advantages in power. It has advantages in some of the capability we're introducing around cap touch, security. I believe it'll be the highest level of security for any 16-bit product in the world. And it's got very good performance. The 16-bit RL78 core is far better performance than equivalent MCUs in that space. As we move up, the RX is also on equivalent to its ARM competitors. It also outperforms them in spec marks. And then we built in very specialized functions around cap touch and particularly motor control that are far superior in controlling motors from low end to high end. So there's motors in everything you have, practically, your dishwasher, your dryer, your air conditioner. So there's tiny motors, large motors, and every single one of them has at least one MCU. On RA, it's again a we're utilizing our big MCU infrastructure and our very robust IOs to offer a very broad offering here. You have to hit the right price point with the right features, and we've done that. Our internal manufacturing is extremely competitive. Some of the RAs also built in TSMC, and we've built very competitive dies with very high performance there, and we will go higher as well. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, let me just add also, right, from an interface and AI perspective that Roger alluded to, there's several things that make a difference, including the fact that we have some unique flash technologies that provide competitive advantages when it comes to die size and performance and reliability. The other thing is the kind of algorithms that you're able to port in onto the MCUs, whether it be motor control or a range of other applications. And last but not the least, I also say the ecosystem partnerships that Roger and the team have developed have been significant. So in addition to the software aspect, which I alluded to on the right-hand side, and the user experience, but there's been some significant emphasis, the security is, in addition to tamper-proofing, and in addition to side channel attacks, these are things we've emphasized a lot of resources on. So that's ultimately starting to make difference in terms of our traction in the marketplace.
Yeah, thank you, Sailesh. Yes, on the software side, we've introduced a flexible software package that is being adopted across Renesas now, and it's very successful, and our customers really like it.
ありがとうございました。Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
ありがとうございます。続きまして、
Thank
シテ
you.
ィグループ証
Next, the question comes from Fujiwara-san from Citigroup.
ミュート解除してです。
Please unmute yourself, Fujiwara-san. Thank you. This is Fujiwara from Citigroup. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I have one question. So this time, you've been able to show the long-term financial model. You've been able to update that for us. Gross margin, it's 5%, well, or a little under 5%, I guess. You've been able to make that amount of upward revision, and also on operating profit, there's like a maximum 10% amount of upward revision. On gross profit, I think it really comes from top line growth. But then you've been able to make this upward revision. What is the breakdown of this? For example, does it come from top line? Does it come from cost synergy? So how are you able to see that upward revision?
Yes, so I think I spoke to it earlier. Thank you for the question. I spoke to it earlier during my presentation. So for the margin, gross margin side, I told you there were three drivers. One is certainly the cost aspect of it. The second is the price component. And the third component of it is really fuller utilization of the factories. So that certainly has helped in terms of the gross margin. The improvement and flow through to the bottom line, which is the operating margin question that you're addressing, primarily comes from very focused investments of our R&D, right? That in a nutshell kind of talks to why we've been successful at driving operating margin improvement. For example, right, in the infrastructure area in particular, we're just focused in three areas. We don't go out and do hundreds of different things. We don't do CPUs. We don't do GPUs for the data center. We don't go after the catalog markets that addresses piece parts in that area. We're very, very focused in terms of where our investments are going into, especially when it comes to data center and the 5G area. And also the additional leverage that we have is in general, the analog and power products on an R&D basis should consume less in terms of R&D resources than major SoC and MCU or MPU efforts. So the combination of those two factors really helps us to drive the operating margin. Relentless focus. It is very, very important to know what you're not going to do, as just as much as clearly defining what is it that you're going to do. That drives the improvement and the leverage that we see from the gross margin to the operating margin side of the business. And in addition, the sales has been able to do a tremendous job in terms of the top line growth, which helps the flow through that we're seeing.
Thank you, got that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question will be from UBS Securities, Yasui-san, Mr. Yasui. Please begin your question after unmuting yourself. Thank you for the opportunity. I am Yasui from UBS. I have two questions. The first question, on page 10 of the presentation, the growth. You said that industry and IoT is projected to have a very strong growth, but IBU is always a difficult segment for me to make a projection. Industrial and IoT, you are very confident about the growth in the future, but infrastructure was also a surprise to me. So in 2022 in particular, of course, I think it's very difficult to make a prediction, but if things turn out to be different from your projection, Sailesh or Roger, if there's anything that could go wrong in the competitive environment, or maybe the 5G adoption may not turn out to be as what was predicted, will there be any thing that is not likely that will go different from your projection? What are the potential risks? And as for RISC-V, my second question, if we're going for RISC-V, this could induce a change in the competitive environment because the new players may come in. So if the open players come in, what are the factors that could change the competitive environment, the competitive landscape? What are your presumptions for that? So those are the two questions that I have.
Thank you for your question. I'll let Chris answer the first part of the question, and then I'll give you my views. And then for the second question, Roger can answer it. And I'll come back and add a few comments at the end. So Chris, you want to start?
Yeah,
so what can go wrong?
Regarding 22, and of course, the environment is always unpredictable, but one of the things we've done, as Shibata-san talked about earlier, is to get our customers to place non-cancelable, non-rescalable orders for a lot of our key customers. And we've been able to secure about 70 to 75% of our operating plan based on those orders, and this covers the top customers in industrial, infrastructure, and IoT. Now, what I think is more certain, I think industrial is on a very strong vector coming from the mega trends that Sailesh talked about, and the investment infrastructure upgrade, green initiatives, as well as all the improvement in the connectivity of the factories. I think we can debate if 5G rollout is going to happen as strong, but what is very strong and certain in the infrastructure would be the cloud and server, which will continue to grow. But to some extent, our growth is really coming more from gain share and transition to new technologies than really the market itself. As Sailesh talked about, the move to DDR4 and to DDR5 is providing a multiple X content in each of the memory DIMM, as well as on the power of the server side, as we move from the current generation to the new generation of Intel and AMD CPUs, where we have a lot more content. I think this drives natural growth. So I would say, while we need 5G rollout to happen to grow in the wireless infrastructure, we actually don't need the server market to grow that much for us to grow in server. On IoT, I would say it's essentially going also based on what Roger mentioned. It's a lot of NPI, it's a lot of RA, it's a lot of new customers in connected fields on top of computing and home appliance, which are a big market for us. So I would say here as well, we are also relatively stronger than the environment.
Thanks, Chris. And the only thing that I'll add is, could there be some macroeconomic factors that can reshape the market? Definitely, right? But in terms of what we can do and what we control, we certainly see a strong momentum. Now, if inflationary pressures are such in the market and there's massive supply disruptions, then of course the story changes, right? But given where we're sitting today, and in terms of what we see specifically for our products, it's definitely a very healthy environment. But are there risks? Of course there are. We don't control the macroeconomics, and that can always change things by the way they occur. But for the second part of the question, Roger, do you want to take a crack at it?
Sure. So on RISC-V, it could change the competitive environment, but I think we're in a very unique and advantageous position, having done our first RISC-V already. And also, there's very few companies, this is an open architecture, there's very few companies that can develop their own cores like Renesas could. So we have various avenues that we could tackle this competitive disruption. And quite honestly, I think Renesas would be in a great position to overtake any of them.
And I'll also add, we're expending internal resources to develop our capabilities in this area. So stay tuned. There's much more excitement to come around the RISC-V arena. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much for the answer.